next questions. So we have a series of 3 questions, each of which will go to 2 candidates. The first question is for Kathleen Matthews and Senator Raskin. So we'll start with Kathleen Matthews. The question is climate change strictly an environmental issue? Yes or no, and please explain. And you have 90 seconds, please.
Turn it on.
I think I didn't turn it off.
Did it go off?
On and off. And we need to do that more with the lights, right? So climate change is obviously not just an environmental issue. It is wreaking havoc with the environment, but it is a national security issue. We know that the kind of climate disruption that we're seeing is causing water shortages, it's causing famine, and that causes civil unrest and crises all over the world. We also know that climate change is a health issue. It's an economic issue. As we see the climate change going on in the world, whether it's more dryness, more wetness, more heat, more cold, we see that disrupting economies all over the world. So climate change is a threat on the most global and the most comprehensive proportions, I think, of anything that we're facing in our lifetime now.
Okay, thanks. Thanks, Senator Raskin.
You know, I think we have to stop talking about climate change as an issue. It's not an issue, it's the entire context within which we've got to decide every other issue. Whether it's trade, whether it's banking, whether it's the budget, and so on. And I agree with things that Kathleen said, but I would add one very important thing that the Pope brought to our attention and underscored. It is a social justice issue. Because the fallout and the consequences of climate change are felt first and most intensely and most durably by the poor. It's always going to be air conditioned where the rich people live. The country clubs are always going to have enough water. But you know, the glimpse that we've seen of the oil wars and the water wars and the millions of refugees trying to escape Syria today could be just a tiny foretelling of a future if we don't get on top of this thing and break the carbon addiction. We could have hundreds of millions of climate refugees trying to get into the northern countries. And at that point, it will not just be Donald Trump, but it might be his entire party talking about building a wall. He wants to build a wall in Mexico, Walker wants to build it in Canada, the rest of them are going to want to build a dome over the whole country and put it under lock and key. But what we need to invest in renewable energy, and that means we need to break the campaign finance system, which is the hidden key to dealing with climate change problems all over the earth.
Thank you. Good thoughtful answers from our candidates. Okay, the second question goes to the 2 delegates, Gutierrez and Barbe. What is the most effective specific action on climate change that you would take in Congress? And we'll start with Barbe, Delegate Barbe.
Thank you. I think the most important thing we can do is to implement a renewable energy portfolio standard throughout the United States of America. I began this process many years ago when Bob Ehrlich was governor of the state of Maryland. I convinced the Senate President, the House Speaker, and even a Republican governor that this was good public policy. That idea of requiring that a certain percentage of our electricity has to be from non-fossil fuel renewable sources is a key public policy initiative because it allows us to reduce carbon intensity without having to implement thousands of regulations and to have millions of people alter their lifestyles. Renewable energy, right from the source of where it comes, is the most effective way to bend the curve on carbon intensity and carbon disruption. Now, there are many others. You asked me only to mention one, but I hope that during the balance of this evening, I'll be able to talk about other Maryland policies that I helped to implement that ought to be used nationally. Maryland is a leader, we should lead America, and then America should become a leader for the world.
Well, I think right now in Congress, the strongest thing that I could do would be to ensure that none of the current programs that are protecting our climate and our environment are destroyed by those that would ensure that we no longer are taking the steps that only the federal government can do. I would, secondly, make sure that the EPA is not defunded. We know that every day they are taxed on the role of the EPA as they promote standards that are going to specifically help to lower pollution, control all the contamination from coal plants, on, protect our water, protect our air. We've had laws in place since Nixon was president. They work well. They have protected our environment and they serve as a model. And finally, I think I would build on our Maryland experience. As Kumar rightly says, we've been a leader in so many things. I think the federal government now needs to lead and make sure that other states are taking the same kind of actions that we have taken and that we still have to continue pushing so that we don't have the damage that is being done, and particularly in states where they don't believe that the climate, that our quality of life needs to be protected.
Thank you. We also have, again, yet another elected official here, Franklin Garcia, who is the shadow representative for the District of Columbia, a visitor. Thanks for being with us this evening. Our third question in this round goes to Mr. Jawando and to Mr. Anderson. And the question is, would you sponsor legislation to put some kind of price on carbon? And can you talk about any details or specifics as to how you would approach a carbon pricing? So first, Mr. Jawando.
Thank you for the question, and thank you for recognizing for our DC friend that we would be your closest congressman. So we're pushing for your full voting rights, but glad you're here. The answer is yes. To be short, we do have to put a price on carbon. It's the only way. If you talk, I like what Jamie said about we have to look at this as not just a singular issue, but something that affects everything we do. And money drives things. So what you support, budgets and moral documents, what you subsidize, that's what you're gonna produce. It's the reason we have all this corn and high fructose corn syrup, because we subsidize those products. So I think you have to put a price on carbon. The thing, and I would support a proposal to do that. I think cap and trade's one. There's a lot of different ways you can do it. The thing that I'm concerned about when we do that is that we protect vulnerable communities. You have to be careful as we manage this transition. For example, some people, if you take an extremist or a purist approach, would say that LIHEAP, which provides low-income folks with heating and oil and would be a subsidy that needs to be removed. And I say that we can't do that because we know that these issues impact vulnerable communities first. That being said, we do need to make sure our public policy puts us towards a green economy, and that's where all the subsidies, and we close the loopholes for big oil and gas and coal. So I will be a big proponent of that, and I think we'll talk more about that tonight, but the short answer is yes.
Thank you. Mr. Anderson, again, would you sponsor some kind of legislation relative to carbon fees, and how specifically would you approach that?
Well, the quick answer to the question is yes, we should put a price on carbon, and yes, I would sponsor legislation. But it really raises an issue at the outset that it's just important to distinguish. There's really two things, as all of you know, that are at issue when you're trying to deal with a problem like global climate control. You have the issue of dirty energy, and what do we do about that? And you have the issue of clean energy, and how do we promote that? So this question really arises on the dirty energy side, because we have to do both. So we have to try and reduce the amount of dirty energy in our air and in our water. We should have a carbon tax, right? The cap and trade approach has not proved fruitful. So yes, we should have a carbon tax. But on the other side of the issue, if you eliminate dirty energy, well, all that's doing is maybe half of the task. Because by 2030, we should really be trying to bring the 400 parts per million of carbon in the air probably down to about 370. Some experts say it'll take till 2100 to get that back down to 350. But yes, we want to have a carbon tax, but at the same time, we want to have renewable energy up to about 50% by 2030. Thank you.